We have with us Dhruva Jaishankar. He's the Executive Director of ORF America. Thank you, Dhruv, for taking our time and speaking to DD India. We've seen a lot of discussions on both America's Indo-Pacific strategy and, to an extent, even the European Indo-Pacific strategy. It's been 2 years for the Americans and about a year and a half for the European Indo-Pacific strategy. What progress have we seen so far, and what more can we expect in the future?
So the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy it was the first one done by this government in the U.S., the Biden administration. It follows the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Trump administration. There's actually been quite significant progress in a few areas. A lot of it has to do with the strategic relationships. So the U.S., Japan, and Korea held a historic summit in the U.S. A lot of trilateral cooperation that bridged a lot of the differences that had existed between Japan and Korea, and very concrete cooperation on defense and technology. Philippines, the U.S.-Philippines relationship is really solidified in the last Vietnam as well. A lot of trade and defense cooperation between the U.S. and Vietnam. India, of course, is a highlight. ISET is the strategic technology dialogue. And that's actually translating, I mean, it's not just words, it's translating into cooperation on semiconductors, actual investments in areas. To give one example, on 5G and 6G cooperation and standards. Defense production in India, space cooperation. We'll see some actually major developments this year. So these are just some. Australia, AUKUS, US, UK, Australia cooperating on nuclear submarines and emerging technology. So if you look around from a strategic point of view, there's been considerable progress made in the last 2 years between the US and these key relationships. The one, I would say, and through the Quad as well, the one place where I think the US has not delivered as much as we expected is on the economic policy front. They released something called IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. And while they managed to get a lot of countries to sign on, and it was not going to be about reducing tariffs, it was not a trade agreement, but they haven't been able to make as much progress, partly because of resistance in the US, domestic political resistance.
From the West, the perspective, the way it flows, they say India is the bulwark against China. But many also question that small additions is not what it's looking for. It's looking for if not complete substitution. When is that process going to begin? When India reaches that point? Of course, in the next few years, the economy is going to grow. This year by 6%. The GDP is also set to grow, while the Chinese are seeing an economic downturn. They're exporting deflation. They're also looking at major real estate issues back home. So the picture for their economy is not that great, but for India it is. So is it just going to be pockets of funding and additions, or are we looking at India becoming the substitute there as well as the dominant geo-economic power in Asia?
So, I think it's a bit more difficult, a bigger challenge. While consumption has fallen in China and is going to be a bit more flat going forward, partly for demographic reasons and for other reasons, exports will be a big pressure release for the Chinese economy. In fact, China has become such a center for manufacturing supply chains on almost any kind of manufactured good today, that in some ways all the resources, all the processing, intermediate goods are all produced in China today, to a very large percentage, and particularly in key areas. So that exports are actually going to grow out of China quite a lot. In fact, there will be cases of, if not actual dumping by China, borderline overcapacity related exports. So unfair trade practices really being translated into growing exports. And one of the things I think a lot of countries, including India, are struggling with is when you have this inflow of cheap goods, how do you actually stimulate your own domestic industry? And again, developing countries are facing this on some goods. Advanced economies are facing this on issues like semiconductors and solar panels. So this is going to become a big challenge. To actually diversify and de-risk will require very high capital expenditure. And again, the question is, where is that going to come from? Some of it, so some of it is going to be in India, is happening. It's government capital expenditure. The capex, if you see, has gone up quite significantly in the last few years. But ultimately, private investment is going to have to pick up that slack. And I think that it remains the big question mark. That's one of the big question marks about whether India can help to de-risk, both for its own domestic national resilience, but also to make it an export destination as well.